Hey guys, I'm back. Part one of my gameplay analysis video did so well that I decided I wanted to get part two out as soon as possible. And by well, I mean 30 views, which is actually pretty good for my walkthroughs. Yeah, this is a weird cutscene here where Wesker is basically shooting at bees for some reason. Yeah, always a weird cutscene in my opinion. Sorry it took nearly a week for me to record part two, but I was busy during the week with work, and I also brought my mother to the ballet as a Christmas present. Totally wasn't for me; it was absolutely for her. Unfortunately, happened to bring. I happened to go to the ballet on the wettest day of the year in Ireland, or it felt like the wettest day of the year at least. So it was. The ballet was nice, but everything outside that was a bit miserable. And on top of that, I think I may have caught the flu. So apologies if my voice sounds a bit more nasally than usual. Right, so um, we are about to go to back to the mansion, and this is where my favorite enemies in the game are introduced, which of course are the hunters. Anyone who has played Resident Evil will know that the hunters are quite possibly the most dangerous enemy in the series. They're strong enough by themselves, but they also have an instant kill attack where they basically cut your head off. And yeah, I've had more than one occasion where I forgot to save the game for a few hours and was sent miles back because I wasn't careful enough around these guys. So yeah. Um, uh, also, I was thinking down the road I would also like to do gameplay analysis videos of for Resident Evil 7, which I adore that game, and also Signalis. For anyone who doesn't know, Signalis is an indie survival horror game that came out a few years ago, which I absolutely adore. But um, I feel it's a game that a lot of people have already covered, and as such, I never bothered reviewing it because I feel like I wouldn't be able to add anything to the conversation. But it's a phenomenal game, and this part annoys the shit out of me because on the way back, snakes drop down from above, and it's almost impossible to get by them without being bit. Usually you're okay, but occasionally you will end up getting poisoned from the bites, so something to keep in mind there. But yeah, I'd like to do a hard mode playthrough for Signalis if I get around to it because it's an incredible game, and I feel like more people should be playing it. I'm sure it sold okay, but not nearly the amount it should have. I mean, when you have other indie survival horror games like Garden of Banban or whatever the fuck it's called, and Five Nights at Freddy's getting millions of sales, it just seems a bit unfair that other better indie survival horror games, in my opinion, better survival horror games are largely forgotten. So yeah, just that's the main reason I started my channel, was to highlight cool indie survival horror games for people to check out, and Signalis is one of the best. So there you go. Not only are the hunters possibly my favorite enemy in the entire Resident Evil series, but they also have by far the coolest intro cinematic. Um, yeah, in the remake it's done pretty well as well. It's a first person view of the hunter running towards you, and it's very unnerving. Now, of course, thankfully in the remake you can use defense items if a hunter pins you down, but there's no defense items will not work against their instant kill move, so definitely something to keep in mind. Uh, it's another reason I'm happy I've got the assault shotgun because the assault shotgun can take these guys down in two shots maximum. So very useful. And this room is one of the coolest fights in the entire remake. This in the original you could not have fights like this because as I mentioned earlier, the lower floor and the upper floors are separated by loading screens. But here, what's the hunter will jump over the balcony and join the fight down below. It's really cool. It's a really dynamic fight, and Yeah, I just wish there had been more moments like this. There, like as I said earlier, there's not a huge amount of enemies in Resident Evil Remake, and the ones that are here aren't the most difficult to take down. So I'm not saying I wanted the game to be an action game, but I definitely feel like there could have been a few more enemies. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. Our main goal right now is to find the two emblems that will allow us access to the laboratory, as well as a battery that will give us access to a cave system behind a waterfall in the courtyard. So, despite feeling like the game has only just begun, I'm actually more than halfway through it. I think from here it only takes me about an hour to finish the entire game, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I think a lot of people think Resident Evil is this very long, confusing puzzle game or something. But no, when you know what you're doing, it's very very short. But I think I prefer when survival horror games are short because um, I think the reason most survival horror games are short is because it's very hard to get the balancing right over the course of 20 hours. Like Resident Evil 4 is about 20 hours first time through, but you don't know. At least in Resident Evil 4, there's almost no danger of you running out of ammo or soft locking the game. Where that possibility is always there in classic RE games. So I feel like in a way they kind of had to make these games shorter to just in case someone did manage to soft lock themselves, that they wouldn't be sent back 10, 20 hours. They'd be sent back maybe 2 or 3. But yeah, I also feel like survival horror games, while I do prefer them to action games, they don't allow for the same kind of evolution that Resident Evil 4 did. Because in RE4 you start off with just a pistol and a knife, but as the game goes on and you're fighting simple, villagers, but as the game goes on you get a shotgun and you get a mine thrower and you can even buy a fucking rocket launcher if you have enough money. And the action gets more elaborate and the scenarios get crazier, and I don't feel like in a true survival horror game you'd be able to do that because um, I just feel like there'd be too many variables, because there'd be no guarantee you'd have enough ammo by that point, and there'd be no guarantee you'd find all the guns. You can in RE Remake you can completely miss the shotgun if you're not careful. You can completely miss the grenade launcher. So Capcom kind of had to take all that into account when they made this game. That there was no guarantee you'd find all this stuff, and there was always the danger you'd soft lock yourself. So I don't feel like a 20-hour survival horror game is possible. I mean, some people could argue that Alan Wake 2 is 20 hours, but I don't know if I would consider that game a true survival horror, because ammo is pretty lenient in it, and you're always able to run past enemies in that game. But yeah. On a completely optional note, Alan Wake 2 is fantastic and you should play it. Uh, yeah. So yeah, as as much as I love classic survival horror games, I don't feel like there's a huge amount you can do with them. Take for example Alien Isolation, which is probably one of my favorite survival horror games. That game is incredible, but I don't feel like it evolves that much throughout the game. It really is you hiding from an alien for nearly 20 hours. Yeah, there's different weapons you can get throughout the game, but those weapons don't work on the alien. They only work on human enemies and the robots. So there was always a part of me that kind of wished the game became more like Aliens as it went on. Like you'd find a pulse rifle at some point and you could start fighting back. Because that's another thing the RE games do really well. At the start of the game, at the start of most classic RE games, you are the hunted. Enemies can kill you very easily. You have very little ammo or resources. But by the end of the game, you're a fucking tank. And the enemies should fear you. And I think RE3 is probably the best game for that because you are a walking arsenal by the end of that game, and it's certainly a difficult thing to pull off. But if you can, uh, the results can be incredible. And yeah, I kind of wish that Alien Isolation had done stuff like that. I still think Alien Isolation is incredible, but it highlights the fact that if you want to be a survival horror game, you know, there's not a huge amount of room for evolution. Even Amnesia, The Dark Descent, plays similarly. Uh, yeah, the layout of this area is a bit different from the first game, quite different, in fact. But I feel like I prefer this layout. It's very confusing in the original, but everything kind of flows together much stronger, much better in the remake. In that room up there, I will find the battery, but of course, because I'm playing real survival mode and I don't have any fucking space, I will need to return to this area later. My first goal is to take down Yawn, the snake, who in part one, if you remember, I fought him in the attic with Richard, but this time I don't have Richard's help because he's a dipshit who just seems to want to get eaten by large animals. So this time I'm going solo. Again, though, by this point, if you played the game decently, you should have loads of ammo. So I have loads of magnum bullets. I have loads of grenade rounds. To me, this is where the game stops being a true survival horror game and becomes more like not an action game, but more like what would you even describe it? Maybe an adventure game with more like an adventure game where you're it's more about the puzzle solving than it is about taking care of your resources or anything like that. I find it funny that this series is called Resident Evil over here in the West, when it is still called Biohazard over in Japan. I don't like the name Biohazard. It instantly brings to mind things like toxic waste and hazmat suits and stuff like that, and I don't really think any of that describes Resident Evil, But I also hate Resident Evil as a title because it only really works with the first game, maybe 7 as well. But the first game is really the only one where you're in a house for the majority of the playtime, and you might think, well, maybe they only intended to make one game, and what's funny about that is apparently that's true. I think Shinji Mikami only intended to make one Resident Evil game, which is crazy to think about nearly 30 years later. Oh, holy fuck, it's been 30 years. I think this is Capcom's cash cow now. I can't think of anything that's more popular aside from Monster Hunter, but I even think in lifetime sales, Resident Evil absolutely trumps. I think I saw statistics the other day on N4G. I can't remember where it was, but News for Gamers. Who the fuck even uses that website anymore? No one's going to even know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I saw statistics that RE has sold over 110 million units in its lifetime, which is absolutely insane when you think about it, because it's a horror series, and horror games aren't that. I'm not going to say they're not that popular, but there's a lot of people who outright will not play horror games, and yet RE2 Remake sold like 20 million copies. It's insane to think about. Yeah, look, I love RE more than the next person. It's one of my favorite series, but I kind of hate Capcom's obsession with it, because I feel like, possibly my second favorite franchise, third, if maybe after Silent Hill, is Devil May Cry, and Devil May Cry 5 sold like 12 million copies, but apparently that's not enough anymore. It's been nearly, I can't believe I'm fucking saying this, but it's been nearly 7 years since Devil May Cry 5. And all we've gotten since is the anime series, which, unpopular opinion, but I thought the anime series was fantastic. But you think with all the popularity that game gets, or that series gets, that we would have got a Devil May Cry 6 by now. But I think the reason we haven't is because Capcom are just so fucking hard for RE, They just don't want their developers wasting time on anything else. unless it's Street Fighter, of course. But I think the reason they keep making Street Fighter games is because they're full of microtransactions, and even if those games don't sell very well, but they do sell well. I think Street Fighter 6 sold like 7 million copies, but even if it didn't sell well, they'd still make the money back through microtransactions. Which I know Devil May Cry 5 does allow you to buy red orbs, but anyone who knows those games knows that it's pointless, because within a few hours you'll have everyone maxed out anyway. So yeah, so it's almost like a double-edged sword in that I love RE and I hate it at the same time, because I feel like Capcom just don't take risks anymore because of it. You have to remember, it's only been 2018 when RE7 came out, and in that time we've had RE7, RE Village, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and there might be another game I'm not even thinking of right now. So, like, that's 5 games in a very short period of time, and we've only gotten one Devil May Cry game in almost the same amount of time. So, yeah, I don't know. And it also begs the question, like, if you're going to make so many RE games, and that's not even counting the multiplayer stuff like RE Resistance or REverse, which reminds me, I think the only Resident Evil game, or what could be considered a mainline RE game, I haven't played is Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. I got Resident Evil Outbreak 1 for Christmas years ago. Like, it must be over a decade ago. But I didn't realize that the fucking European version didn't have online. It's a single player only game. And I could not get through the opening area of that game by myself. I feel like that, I could be wrong, but I feel like that game requires multiplayer to even get through. It's so frustrating, because I feel like a classic RE game with multiplayer would be my favorite thing in the world. But Capcom have no interest in doing it. I think they have no interest in doing it because it's not monetizable. They can't, a traditional RE campaign that you can play with a friend. How are you going to sell microtransactions in that? How are you going to sell a battle pass in that? And I really hate how multiplayer gaming has gone, because I remember during the PS3 era that I felt like anything could have multiplayer, and you'd always see games with campaign co-op like Gears of War or Halo, or even Killzone 3 had a split screen campaign. But you don't see that anymore, because these developers, they want you online all the time. I think the new Call of Duty requires an internet connection, even when you're playing the fucking single player. And Capcom have straight up said, no, we're never doing another RE Outbreak game. So I just don't see. Again, people love to praise online gaming, but I think it's done more harm than good to the industry, because not only do we not get co-op campaigns in a lot of games anymore, but we also, how many split screen games have there been in the last decade? I can think of maybe 3 or 4, very few. And I feel, again, they don't want you playing locally, because if you're playing locally, you're playing offline, and if you're playing offline, you're not engaged with their microtransactions or their season passes or any of that bollocks. So I feel like Capcom would have a lot of success with a traditional multiplayer campaign, a traditional RE campaign that allows you to play with friends, but because they wouldn't make all the money in the universe, they have no interest in it, which is really sad, So in the end, what did we get? We got Resident Evil 5 co-op, which is fine, but it's an action game. I don't want to play an action game in co-op. RE6, which is just fucking mental, anyways. Then it went back to mostly single. Resident Evil Revelations 2 had split screen co-op, and my brother wouldn't even play the first hour with me. It's the most bizarre fucking co-op I've ever seen in my life. So player 1 will play as either Claire or Barry, and Claire or Barry carry all the guns and they shoot all the enemies. Player 2 will either play as Moira or this little girl, I can't remember what her fucking name is, but all the little girl can do is point and shit. She points her fucking finger around the environment, and stuff will start lighting up. Ammo, yeah, she points at ammo, and then once she points at it, it'll go blink, and then player one can see where the ammo is and pick it up. That aside from that, yeah, she points at ammo. She points at this. There's this predator style monster that can go invisible, and only only the little girl can see her. Or only the little girl can see these enemies. So you have to point at the enemy, and player one shoots them, which is kind of a cool idea. But wow, that co-op was shit. That was such a shit co-op mode, and that was it. That's pretty much it for co-op Resident Evil. So. However, if you do crave local classic survival horror games, I really recommend the Obscure games, Obscure 1 and Obscure 2, The Aftermath. I know they only got mixed reviews at launch, but I think they're brilliant games. They're basically classic RE games, but with it's more of a teenage slasher movie kind of vibe they're going for, and all the characters are unbearably annoying. So if you can get over that, they have great puzzles, they have great atmosphere, great action, great co-op. Yeah, the Obscure games are really underrated in my opinion. So definitely check them out. What the fuck is even going on here? I zoned out for the last 20 minutes. I just completed a puzzle. That's a new puzzle where you have to rearrange the pieces to create a full picture. It's like a little jigsaw puzzle. You might think, well, what's the point of that? But I like the fact that there's so many little extra puzzles. They didn't just rest on their laurels. They could have just made a one-to-one remake with better graphics, and everyone would have praised the shit out of it. But they went so above and beyond with this game that it's kind of baffling. And it's why I find stuff like RE3 Remake so disappointing, because that game felt like a step backwards. That game felt like, come on guys, let's just fucking get this out in 6 months. Slap RE3 on it and sell it for $60, Whereas it really felt like the developers of this game cared. So yeah, I don't know. Even though it's not my favorite Resident Evil game, I can't say enough good things about it. We are unfortunately now getting into what I consider the worst part of the game. I find with a lot of RE games they get worse as they go on, and I don't mean that as an insult, but well I kind of do, I guess. But what I mean is, anyone who knows this series knows that these games have a tendency to end in boring laboratory-like settings. RE1 ends in a laboratory setting, RE2 ends in a laboratory setting, Resident Evil 3 ends in a factory kind of thing. I think RE3 probably has the best final hour of any game in the series. RE4 definitely does, but RE4 also has some kind of laboratory stuff towards the end. RE5, RE6 has 4 crazy, I don't know. The less said about RE6's campaign, the better. Resident Evil 7, of course, had the boat section towards the end, which is by far the weakest part of that game. It says a lot about how good the first few hours of Resident Evil 7 are, that the game was able to get by. The game was still successful despite the terrible final 2 hours in that game, because I genuinely don't know what the hell happened towards the end of that game. And Resident Evil 8 ends. I think by the end of Resident Evil 8 you're driving a mech and stuff. That game just went that jumped the shark so fucking bad. In fact, I'm struggling to think of an RE game that has that strong the whole way through. Maybe Resident Evil 4, but yeah, aside from that, nothing comes to mind. RE Revelations 1, actually, I think the final chapter of RE Revelations 1 is one of my favorites, because you're exploring this creepy ship underwater. The problem is there aren't really enemies or stuff in it. There's a boss and that's about it, but it's really atmospheric and cool. So yeah, I like RE1. And ironically, despite hating the game, Resident Evil Revelations 2 ends in a creepy mansion, very similar to the Spencer Mansion. That's the last chapter. That should have been the first. That game definitely doesn't put its best foot forward. But yeah, I always wonder why every RE game seems to start out really strong and then gets worse as it goes on. But I think it probably has more to do with the fact that there's usually no tension by this point. You have all your weapons, you have loads of ammo to spare. There's not much more the game can do to keep you on your toes. Obviously, the games have gotten better at this as they've gone on. RE2 Remake, of course, added Mr. X about halfway through the game. And I know some people don't like Mr. X for some reason, but I think he was a necessary inclusion in that game because, again, I'm talking about RE2 Remake, Mr. X now, the one that follows you. Because by the time he arrives, you do have a shit ton of ammo by that point and the means to take care of most enemies, but you can't take down Mr. X. And that did add, an extra bit of complexity to proceedings. I hate this part so much. So basically what you have to do here is run around the entire courtyard to put in a battery, and then you have to run back to this part to use the crank to close up the waterfall and get by it. And again, you just, poisoned by feckin' snakes again. But, what was I talking about? Yeah. So, more stuff like that. And I feel like Resident Evil 3 original also kept things interesting with Nemesis, So, Resident Evil 3 was the first game where it felt like it was becoming... You could see the beginnings of an action series there, RE3 gives you a shit ton of ammo, but it still just barely feels like enough at times because you can't just kill Nemesis all the time with the ammo you have, and you have loads of ammo, but there's also a lot more enemies to deal with and stuff like that. And I think my favorite boss fight in the series might be the clock tower encounter with Nemesis because it's like everything's been building to this moment, It's just really difficult. It's a really difficult boss fight where, Nemesis can kill you in one or two attacks if you're not careful. And I remember the first time I played that game, it must have taken me a few hours to get by that boss fight, but it felt epic. It felt like it was the right time for that encounter, and a great end to Act 1. Would it be Act 1? I don't know. I don't really understand the 3-act structure, to be honest with you. But, yeah. And then Nemesis continues to be a threat after that. And he gets more and more fucked up. And I remember, and then there's the fight where... there's this fight where you need to get him to... You need to hit him with these chemicals. There's these pipes that shoot out chemicals, and if Nemesis hits one of the pipes, these chemicals will spray in his face and do damage to him. And I just thought, what a great adversary. Like he's almost like the Terminator. And I always felt like, I know some people really don't like pursuer enemies, but they do keep things interesting because when you have a grenade launcher and you're able to kill a zombie or a dog or a hunter in one shot, where's the challenge at that point? But pursuer enemies do give you that challenge because they can't be killed. I know Lisa Trevor can't be killed in RE1 Remake, but she only appears twice before the boss fight, and that just doesn't feel like enough. There is a lot of tedious puzzle work that needs to be done in this area, but there's a cutscene coming up that I always like. It's where Jill finds Enrico badly wounded. It's just in this room here. Again, another thing this game does, RE1 does, that no other game in the series does, is that people die. That's another thing. Again, it's another big corporation thing, but after this game, no mainline RE characters really die when you think about it. In this one, I'll let this cutscene play out first because, I don't know, some of the lines are kind of funny.
Is that you, Jill?
Is that voice Enrico's?
Yeah?
You're alive!
Stop! Are you with anybody, Jill?
No, but why?
The stars are finished. Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
Enrico!
I always laugh at the way he goes, "Are you with anybody, Jill?" Almost like he's trying to ask her. almost like he's trying to ask her out at the most inappropriate moment. I know that's not what he's trying to do, but the way he does that line always made me laugh. Yeah, Resident Evil 1 it's not the only game with multiple endings, but it's the only game where your crew, different members of your crew can die depending on your actions. Like, if you don't save Chris and you blow up the mansion, I think it's safe to assume that fucker's dead, you know? I can't see any way he'd survive that. Same thing with Jill. You can get Barry killed. You can get Rebecca killed. You know, and again, it's this big AAA corporation thing where they don't want to take risks. They don't want to kill off any of their characters because they don't want the possibility of any fans losing interest in the series and not buying the next big game. I even think Leon was supposed to die in RE4. Like, I think that's the thing that was supposed to happen, but Capcom just said that there's no fucking way you're doing that. There's no way you're killing the best character in the series. So, you know, Shinji Mikami just had to let that idea die. But I don't know. I wouldn't have wanted Leon to die anyways because he is the best character in the series, but it certainly would have made that story, that very, very underwhelming story, a lot more interesting. But, yeah, I suppose, well, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, I suppose Ethan does die at the end of Resident Evil Village. But then there's people saying that in one of the cutscenes, one of the ending cutscenes, you see him walking down the road. So I don't even know if that's true. I just feel, you know, as I've said earlier, these characters feel like superheroes. And that's even more true when they all feel invincible. None of them die. That's my problem. Like, yeah. I feel like there needs to be more risks with the storyline and, you know, have characters like Chris or Leon genuinely face life-threatening dangers at points. I would genuinely consider killing off all the main cast at this point. But who could you kill that won't piss off a large group of the fan base, you know? Everyone loves Leon. Well, some people like Chris. Everyone loves Jill. You know, everyone loves Claire. Like... But again, it shouldn't be about people's feelings or who they like or who they don't like. It's like with The Last of Us Part 2. I know a lot of people were pissed off when Joel died. I wasn't. I feel like nothing should be off the table. When it comes, if you're going to tell a mature story, you can't. Well, I don't want my favorite character to die. You know, like if you're an adult, you know, you shouldn't be behaving like a fucking 13-year-old because, you know, your hero died or stuff like that. Like, genuine. That's what I always loved about the first few seasons in Game of Thrones. It felt like anything could happen, and there was no plot armor. There's nothing more annoying than fucking plot armor in games or TV shows, and I feel like something like Resident Evil should have no plot armor. These guys should not be superheroes. Yeah, so like Joel's death in The Last of Us Part 2, it didn't bother me. I always thought he was going to die. It always made me laugh because I read a lot of people's ideas for what would happen in The Last of Us Part 2 before the game came out. And loads of people were saying that, Ellie's going to die and Joel will have to carry on her legacy. It's like, dude, are you fucking with it at all? Like, Joel's story is over. It ended at the end of the first game. He's an old man. It's not about him anymore. So I always expected him to die. What I think they fucked up was the way he died. How quickly it was and how it felt like they were just... They wanted to get him out of the way as quickly as possible. It felt forced to me. I'm not saying he should have had a hero's death or anything like that. I just find the storytelling of the game incredibly messy. And if you play The Last of Us Part 1 and then play The Last of Us Part 2, it genuinely feels like it's written by different people. And I think it is. I think the writer of Westworld actually did the majority of the writing for that game. I'm not getting into The Last of Us Part 2 again. If you like that game and you like that story, more power to you. I think it's a terribly written story, but that's just my opinion. But again, my whole point with this is that fuck plot armor and fuck these people who say you can't do this or you can't do that. You know, if you care about making a compelling story and a story that's going to stay with you, anything should be on the table, and most grown adults would agree with that no character should be safe from death or anything like that. And I again, I don't know. It's again, it seems like a Japanese thing. Like I've watched enough anime at this point now to know that if you've watched Dragon Ball Z or anything, you know that it takes a little bit extra to kill characters in most Japanese media. But yeah, well that because like you look at Yakuza and I think Majima is like 67 in the latest fucking the Pirates of the Yakuza game. So like that's just their way of doing things, and that's fine too. But I find their storytelling it's much stronger when they do things, when they take risks. Like so, a lot of my favorite storytellers are Japanese, anyways. And even I know it's an old example, but like even Final Fantasy VII with Eric's dead. It's not that it's the most heartbreaking thing ever, or it's this or that. But I just love the way. I love the way that you could spend hours leveling her up and it would be all for nothing. Like just how's that for not giving a shit about people's feelings and doing things because it's the story you want to tell it, without spoiling anything, Expedition 33 has a similar moment, and I thought it was just as expertly handled because, yeah, I feel like the writers of Resident Evil, I suppose this is the point, I feel like I'm rambling here, but I think my point is, and what frustrates me so much about the gaming industry is, I am sure that some of the writers of Resident Evil have come up with some fantastic stories that they're not allowed to tell because Capcom are like, well, if you kill off that character, we might get 10 less sales for Resident Evil 12, like it's kind of like, does everything have to be about fucking money, does that come before artistic integrity? And yeah, I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about right now. I think my point is that Resident Evil started off as this series about a group of survivors who were in genuine danger, and depending on your choices, you could get certain members of your team killed. You could get Chris killed. You could get Barry killed. You could get Rebecca killed. And it was like those classic horror movies set in mansions or set in houses, where there's a crazed killer going around and your choices matter, And the series never went back to that again. And we lost something special with that, I think. And the reason we never got back to it, as far as I'm concerned, is these characters are too iconic. You're not killing them. Fuck off. That's basically feels like what Capcom told them. If it sounds like I'm rambling right now, trust me, I am. This is one of the most monotonous parts in the entire game, and there's so much busy work that I don't really know what I'm supposed to say here. Like, oh, look at these caves, aren't they wet? I don't really. I know this is a gameplay analysis video, but there's very little gameplay to speak of, unfortunately, and certainly nothing you haven't already seen. There was that spider boss a few moments ago, but the problem with the spider boss is, as I've already said, by this point you're a tank, and I think it only takes about 3 or 4 well-placed magnum shots to put that fucker down. And even if you get poisoned, there's a blue herb right in the next room, so the odds of you dying there are pretty slim. I think with Chris you also get a flamethrower to take that boss down with, which means it's arguably even easier with Chris, and certainly no danger of you running out of ammo with him when it comes to that boss. Thinking now, I was just thinking with the announcement of the Steam machine the other day that the PC is about to become a very good place. The PC is going to become, or the Steam machine will be a great place to play RE games because the PC has most of them now. I think the only platform that I maybe think is a little bit better is the PS5, but like that's debatable because with emulation you could practically play every game on PC, but you have classic RE 1, 2, 3, Remake 1, 2, 3. This is where Barry joins you for a moment, and he betrays you here by riding the elevator back up once you leave, and I think it's a far more stronger moment than in the original because he doesn't come back 2 moments later, he just leaves. So at that point he's betrayed you, and there's no there's no iffiness about whether he's on your side or not, which I think is a much stronger. It's a much stronger moment, and it definitely makes you question whether you can trust him again. So when that pivotal choice comes up soon, where Barry needs his gun in order to defend himself, it makes the decision on whether to give it to him or not a lot more difficult. So yeah, I just, like I said a million times already, I cannot praise how Jill and Barry's relationship has been handled in the remake enough. I think it's fantastic. And again, I just wish that there was more games in the series that offered these dynamic choice moments and put you more in charge of who lives and who dies. I recently played House of Ashes. I wanted something spooky to play on Halloween, so I bought one of the Dark Picture anthology games. I think most of them are meant to be shite, but I think House of Ashes is meant to be okay, so I bought that on sale for like a tenner. And funnily enough, it's very RE in a lot of ways. Zombies, vampires in that game. It's about a group of soldiers during the World War in Iraq. They get stuck in these old Egyptian pyramid style. Well, they're not Egyptian pyramid, but you know what I mean. These old caves with loads of monsters and vampires crawling around. And it's really, really effective stuff. It's I thought it was fantastic. But the best part about it is how your choices influence who lives and dies. And yeah, again, after playing it, it's something I just wish games like RE did more often. Yeah, so I was talking about how I think the PS5 is a great system to play all the RE games in, but I would still like to see a collection of. Sorry. Also, I want to briefly mention here that Lisa Trevor does follow you about this area, but as you can see, the problem with Lisa Trevor is she's very, very slow. She certainly isn't Nemesis or Mr. X when it comes to movement speed. She poses very little threat, which is disappointing in a way, but also it doesn't drag the gameplay down too much. In RE2 Remake, you could argue that Mr. X, when all you're trying to do is solve a puzzle and you want to fuck off, it could get very frustrating very quickly. And thankfully, that kind of thing does not happen with Lisa Trevor. But yeah, I'd still like to see a classic collection of all the other RE games like Gun Survivor and all. I understand Capcom wouldn't dream of doing it, but because a lot of those games weren't well received. But I just feel, for preservation's sake, like, please do that. And there were some good games in I think Dead Aim. I think people really like Dead Aim for some reason. I've never played it, and I'm almost ashamed to say I've never played it. But some people really seem to like that, and some people even like Gun Survivor. I think it's called, isn't it Gun Survivor, the PS1 game? That game was not well received at release, but it's also worth noting that game was originally meant to be played with a light gun. But because of, I think it was Columbine, because of the Columbine massacre, Capcom decided to remove the light gun compatibility, which I can understand, but I think a better idea would have been to delay the game entirely for maybe another 6 months to a year and just release it as they intended to release it, because it sounds like it would have been a fun time with the light gun, and it's a shame we didn't get that version. Although, speaking of light gun games, arguably my favorite co-op Resident Evil games are the Umbrella Chronicles and the Darkside Chronicles. Two Wii light gun games that I thought were fantastic. You basically play through classic games in the series, so you play through RE1 Remake, you play through Resident Evil 2, you play through Resident Evil 3. I think the second game, I think Darkside Chronicles is Code Veronica and a different game. Oh, RE0, Code Veronica, and I think this new story. But they weren't incredibly well received, but I thought they were an absolute blast. I think the main problem people had with them is that light gun games you expect to be fast paced, and super energetic. But in these light gun games, it's basically a slow moving game where you'll enter a room and shoot two zombies, and it's a lot more slower paced than most light gun games. But I think that really added to the atmosphere, and there's a shit ton of fan service and lore. There's a lot of great content if you're a fan of the series, and I would love to see them get remastered. I think Umbrella Chronicles got ported to the PS3, but it ran like shit. I think it ran like at 20 FPS. There's a weird thing with there were a few games. As everyone knows, the PS3 was considerably more powerful than the Wii. But it seems like every time a Wii game got ported to the PS3, it ran like shit. One of my favorite games is the original No More Heroes. And I was delighted when I found out the game was getting a PS3 port. But it's borderline unplayable. The Wii version is fine. But the PS3 version runs at like 15 frames a second, which is completely unacceptable for a port of a Wii game. But then the same thing happened with Umbrella Chronicles and a few other games. So I'm just wondering, was the jump from 480p to 720p really that massive that the PS3 just could not handle these games in HD? It's weird to think about. But look, I understand Capcom not wanting to port. This is, by the way, I keep trying to shift between topics, but this is Lisa Trevor's room now, and it's a fantastic area. Some of the best graphics in the entire game, I find. Some of the best pre-rendered backgrounds. I thought this place looked real when I first played it, but it's also where a lot of the tragic backstory, a lot of Lisa's tragic backstory is revealed here. It's really good stuff, and climbing up this ladder brings us back to the cabin from earlier. So it loops around on itself in a really satisfying way. We are now basically heading towards the end game. I think all we need to do now is get back into the house, put the two stone metal pieces into the slot, go fight Lisa Trevor, and we're at the laboratory. So yeah, the game certainly feels a lot longer than it actually is, at least the first few times through. Yeah, I know. Basically, what I was saying is, I understand if they don't port many of the less well received classic games to modern systems, but I would still love to see the Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles come to modern platforms because they deserve it. And I don't understand, we don't want to port shit games, but they ported all the Mega Man games to modern platforms, and a lot of them are terrible, so. I don't really see the issue personally. Like what was I going to say? Like all the Blood Omen games the Legacy of Kain games got brought over to PS5 this year, and they're not all fantastic, but it's just nice to have them available in a bundle like that. I don't see the harm. I love every game in that series, but I understand they have issues. But I certainly wouldn't want Blood Omen 2, for all its faults, to not ever see the light of day again. So I don't know. I just don't want stuff lost. I'm big into game preservation, I guess. I hope I've managed to keep this video somewhat interesting throughout its length. I know I've talked about a lot of stuff that's related to Resident Evil, but maybe not about the RE remake itself. But unfortunately, as much as I love this game, it's not the most interesting game to talk about. Classic survival horror games very rarely are. There's loads you can talk about, but the gameplay is purposely designed to be old school. It's designed to be slow paced and more focused on puzzles and exploration. And I've already talked about the game for about 3 hours now. I don't really know. There's a few more things that I have to say, of course, but until I get to those parts of the game, I don't want to. I never wanted this video to repeat itself or feel like I was making the same points over and over again. So I hope I was able to keep this video so far. I hope I've been able to keep it relatively entertaining. Unfortunately, you don't really unlock anything for completing the game on Real Survival. If you finish the game a few times, you will unlock a mode called one explosive zombie or some shit like that. I can't remember what it's called, but basically, this zombie walks about with explosives, and if you shoot him, you blow him up and you die instantly. If he grabs you and you defend yourself, he blows up and you die instantly. It's I haven't got the trophy for completing it yet. I'm sure I could get the trophy for completing it, but it's such an obnoxious fucking mode that I really just don't care right now. And unfortunately, once you unlock it, it stays unlocked. You know, you can't, unless you delete your save data, you're not going back to you can't just play the game without it turned on, which is so stupid. I hate when games do stuff like that. This might sound like a weird thing to bring up, but one of my main issues, and one of the main reasons I like real survival mode, is RE games have a habit of doing this shit that once you complete them, you unlock additional weapons, like an infinite pistol or the rocket launcher, all that stuff. And that's fine, but what bothers me is that stuff is put in your item box without your permission. You know, you can't turn it off. It's always there. And some people might say, well, just don't use those items. Yeah, fair enough, but why can't I turn them off? And what if I accidentally put them in my inventory without thinking, you know, or I fire off a few shots of an infinite pistol? And I know I'm being incredibly pedantic right now, but to me, I never understood the appeal of the infinite rocket launcher. I never saw the appeal of running around the house and killing enemies in one shot. It just, like, where's the fun in that? The whole point of survival horror is it's meant to be stressful and yeah, I know people always say, oh, it's a great unlockable, but no, I strongly disagree on that one. Yeah, but my point is, like, RE2 Remake, RE7. When you finish Resident Evil 7 the first time, if you want to play Madhouse difficulty, you have to, when you finish Resident Evil Village, or when you finish Resident Evil 7 the first time, you unlock an unlimited pistol, or a pistol with unlimited ammo, and you unlock a few coins that add to your defense as well. But what if I want to play on hard mode and not use that shit, you know? Why am I not allowed to decide what I bring with me? And I know people like to say you're in charge of the buttons you press, but I've always disagreed with that shit. Developers are meant to be in charge of creating a balanced experience, you know? Like, that's what difficulty settings are for. And I don't like this idea that, because there's people who go, well, just don't press X or don't just press it. But, like, no, I need to engage with the game's mechanics. Like, what if I need to use this weapon at this point? What if I need to use this mechanic? I don't like that argument. It pisses me off. Just let me turn the fucking weapons off is all I ask. But yeah, I say this because when I play Madhouse, I don't use the unlimited pistol. I just force myself not to take them out of the item box. But again, there's always that fear that I might do so by accident or something. And I know some people probably think I sound insane right now, but I play these games for the challenge first and foremost. That's all I get out of these games. I love survival horror because it's they're not meant to be fair games. They're meant to be punishing, and yeah, I don't know. It to me it would be like starting Dark Souls, but if you buy the launch day edition of Dark Souls, you know, of Dark Souls 1 remastered, you get 100,000 bonus souls, but you're not allowed to play the game without those bonus souls. No. So you'd have to, like, kill yourself on purpose. It's such a stupid thing, but do you understand where I'm coming from? So yeah, that kind of stuff always bothered the shit out of me. Anyways, this is I probably sound like I belong in an insane asylum right now, but trust me, in my fucked up OCD head, what I said just makes a lot of sense. So coming up is the Lisa Trevor boss fight. This is it's a very simplistic boss fight, but what makes it good is the choice you're given to whether to save Barry's life or not. Like I said, if this is your first time playing the original Resident Evil 1, I do feel like some players will be conflicted about giving him his gun back because, well, what if he shoots me, or what if he betrays me again, you know? So it's a genuinely good, it's a genuinely big decision, which a lot of games struggle with, I find. as I was just saying, I recently played House of Ashes, and before that, at Halloween, I played Until Dawn. And while there are some important decisions in those games, there are hundreds of QuickTime events and hundreds of dialogue options you are given throughout that game that have literally no bearing on what happens. So if you fuck up or you trip over a twig or this, nothing's going to happen to you. You don't die. It's very strange, but the choices in RE1 Remake actually do matter. So I appreciate that.
I was worried because I thought you were.
Start talking.
Calm down. I didn't want to do it. Believe me, I can explain.
Don't lie to me! I can't do that.
I actually like Barry a lot, which is why it kind of sucks to do this. But remember, I was going for under 3 hours in this playthrough, and I didn't want to do anything that could feck up getting that time. And unfortunately, if you save Barry, he activates the self-destruct mechanism, which in turn means you have to face the tyrant at the end of the game. All that stuff would have put me over time. I probably could have done this playthrough in a far quicker time, but that would have meant skipping all the cutscenes and stuff like that. And there were a few things I wanted to talk about. All you have to do for this boss fight is push these stones off the pedestal, which reveals Lisa's mother's tomb, or her grave, which drives Lisa to unalive herself. So, very tragic end. You see, this is what I love about RE1. It's still cheesy, and it's still, but it has some really powerful moments. And for whatever reason, very few of the sequels have anything as powerful as this in them. I like what they did with Kendo in RE2 Remake. I think that was very powerful, especially because in the original Kendo is just this creepy gun shop owner who just, I don't know, he hits on Claire, and just he's a bit creepy. But in the remake, his daughter's been infected, and yeah, it's a really powerful moment, and I'd love to see more stuff like that. For all their faults, the RE games, for all their storytelling faults, the RE games occasionally do have some very powerful moments. Now, we are about to head into the laboratory, and thankfully I fly through this area. I think my finish time for this run is 2 hours 51 minutes. But had I been skipping cutscenes and had I been able to improve my run just a little bit more, I easily could have got 2.5 hours. So yeah, it's an incredibly short game when you know what you're doing, even on real survival mode. Another thing to keep in mind here is that at this point, especially if you're not planning to fight the tyrant, there's really no challenge in this area whatsoever. There's a handful of zombies to take down, but there's no hunters. There's no real bosses. Just use your magnum, blow these fuckers' heads clean off. That's another cool thing you get for allowing Barry to die. You get to pick up his magnum, which gives you another 6 magnum rounds. But more importantly, I think the gun might be a little bit more powerful than the magnum you received during the game. It's just a nice little inclusion. There is a new enemy type in the laboratory. They're these weird, creepy crawly things. They kind of look like walking spiders. I don't know how you'd even describe them. They have a very interesting design, but they don't serve much of a purpose. They're very easy to run past. I'm actually skipping a puzzle that you do in a different room in order to find the password to this computer. You need to do a very clever puzzle involving x-rays, but because, again, I'm running low on time, and because I couldn't be fucked, I decided to skip that cutscene. Again, you know, there's not a huge amount to talk about with the laboratory. Few puzzles, you know, some very simplistic exploration. I think the worst part in the laboratory. I like this part. I think this might be a reference to RE4. I'm not 100% sure. No, RE4 wasn't even out at the time. They do something similar in RE4 where the regenerators first. A regenerator falls out of a plastic bag like that. So yeah, I don't know. It just seemed very similar to that scene. I think there's one very annoying part in the laboratory that they added to the remake that I don't think is a good inclusion. They add this part where you need to carry this fuel. This device needs to be refueled. The problem is the fuel required to get this machine working is very volatile. It will explode if it's shaken or damaged in any way. And you need to carry this fuel back to this device in order to refuel it. Which means that if you get attacked, or you shoot your gun, or you do anything, another puzzle I skipped, the fuel will explode and you will have to be sent back to your last save point. It's not the hardest part in the game by any means, but the problem is you need to walk while you're carrying this fuel. So basically, you know, instead of being able to run, instead of being able to fly my way through this area, you know, there's a part where I basically need to walk unbelievably slowly for about 5 minutes, and it's fucking tedious. Aside from that, once that area is complete, all there is a very simplistic tyrant fight. I actually think I take the tyrant down with a single magnum shot. So yeah, very unlikely to soft lock myself here, or you're very unlikely to soft lock yourself here. But aside from that, there's not a huge amount to talk about. The ending I will be getting is considered the bad ending, in that Chris and Barry are dead. In some cases you might consider that a good ending because Resident Evil 5 won't happen then. But Chris and Barry are dead, and you also don't get to fight the tyrant. So, funny thing is, yeah, I don't know if I've already mentioned this. I don't think my dad ever finished Resident Evil. He was shit at it, but also eventually he was able to get to the end of the game. But you know, as everyone knows by this point, the final boss in Resident Evil Remake is you're on the helipad and the tyrant comes out and he starts chasing you around the place, and you need to wait till the clock hits like 30 seconds, at which point a rocket launcher will be dropped down to you and you use that to kill the tyrant. But the rocket launcher never fell for my dad. My dad is weird in that he'd make even the easiest games ever made seem like Dark Souls. You know, he was just so bad at them. Like case in point, Alundra. If you remember Alundra is one of my favorite games of all time. It's like a Zelda game, a top-down Zelda game. If a top-down Zelda game was actually good. Oh my god, that game is so good, and no one ever fucking talks about it. They always talk about Zelda. Play Alundra if you haven't. Emulate the goddamn thing if you have to. But he got Alundra for his birthday one year, and Alundra is only meant to take about 12 to 30, maybe 15 to 20 hours to face. And I remember watching him for months on end, and it took him over 50 hours to complete because he just got obsessed with it. Like, he needed to find every goddamn thing in the entire game. And there was one part. There's one part in Alundra where you're trying to gain access to a church, but the church is locked. So what you have to do is hop off, go around to the back to the cemetery, hop on a tombstone that allows you to get access to the wall, and then you enter through the back window of the church, right? But for some goddamn reason, he thought he needed to, like, swim down a moat. He went through the entire goddamn map. He was swimming down rivers, he was doing this, he was doing that. And I remember wasting 2 days watching him do fucking just crazy shit. Wasting my life away, you know? I was young, I had things to do. And all I was doing was watching this man go completely off the rails trying to find access to his church. And then 2 days later, he decided, oh, let me just try hopping on one of these tombstones then. And that was the answer. I don't even know why I'm bringing this up now, but basically, watching my dad play games was an incredibly frustrating experience. And watching him play Resident Evil may have been the most frustrating experience at all because, I don't know, he just could not finish the goddamn thing. He made me believe for the longest time that Resident Evil was some kind of impossible game that you'd never be able to finish, you know? Funnily enough, my first experience, as I've told you already, I wasn't able to play Resident Evil 2 when it came out. And I didn't. My first experience of Resident Evil 2 was actually the N64 version, if you can believe it. And I emulated. But the emulator was really shit, so you could see through walls and stuff. Oh, it was awful. It was an awful experience. And then I just bought the PS1 version. But my first experience playing Resident Evil 1 was actually the DS version. When I left school, I didn't go to college. I instead got a job working in security with my dad, or like my dad. But that job required me to stay up at night from like 7 o'clock in the evening to 8 o'clock the next morning. It was awful, and I eventually had a massive mental breakdown and I had to leave. But when I got that job, as a gift, my parents got me a DS, and they got me the Resident Evil Deadly Silence bundle. So basically the DS and Resident Evil 1 on the DS, which is a surprisingly good port. It's obviously not a port of the GameCube remake, it's a port of the PS1 original. But really solid, like really good graphics for a DS game. And I played the absolute shit out of it. But that was actually my first experience with RE1, my first experience playing it, and yeah, I just fell in love with it, and I genuinely think, I obviously I think I think the remake is better, but I genuinely think there are some things the DS game does better. It's another version I'd like to see ported to modern platforms. If the DS would be. The problem with the DS is it's a difficult system to port from. It's very difficult. Phoenix Wright, you know, those are probably the most well-known games that got ported from the DS, but you know, they're visual novels, and but something like Resident Evil Deadly Silence had these shitty knife minigames. You didn't have to play them, but they were there if you wanted them. But yeah, I think my point in all this is that I didn't get to play Resident Evil until a long time after my dad did. And he instilled this idea in my head that they were completely impossible, and they weren't. Thankfully, we are coming up to the very end of the game now. Thank fuck, because I don't know how much longer I can go on talking. I feel like I've been rambling for the last 6 hours. I haven't even been recording for 6 hours, but yeah, this kind of thing, I don't know how often I'll be able to do this kind of thing, because trying to find stuff to talk about for hours on end is a lot more difficult than it seems. I don't know how Let's Players do it, but they are much more gifted than many people probably think. Yeah, I don't watch the whole Let's Play thing. I hope you understand by now that I'm not actually playing this game live. Like, I've already played the game and now I'm just talking over it. I don't think I could possibly play games and talk over them at the same time. I think that might be a step too far for me. So people who actually manage to do it are just incredible to me. I don't watch Let's Play. I think the only one I watch is Runeby every now and again. That's mainly because she's super into survival horror games and Sonic, which are my favourite two things in the world, so it makes sense. But aside from that, I watch Xos Haze. If you want to see scripted content that's kind of like this, but a lot better and competent, definitely check his channel out. I let this cutscene run because I think it's one of the only FMV sequences in the game aside from the opening, and big improvement over the original. The original cutscene looks absolutely terrible. I also, of course, kept the part where Wesker gets stabbed through the body because fuck it in, I skipped it. Sorry about that. With Chris, I definitely did because I like watching him get pierced again. Yeah, there he goes. Like I said, one magnum shot and he's down. Now all that's left to do is pick up the key that will allow us to... It's really anticlimactic when you think about facing the game this way. I hate it. You know, you take down Tyrant with one shot and then you just run to the exit. No fanfare, no nothing. It's very disappointing. So yeah, there's not a huge amount left to say. I'm going to simply... I'm simply running back now to the entrance to access the helipad, and that will be that. So I will thank you all for watching, whoever did watch, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please let me know so I can possibly do something like this again. I know it was a bit messy. As I said, this has been almost entirely unscripted, so I just thought of something to talk about and then I talked about it. I don't know if it worked. If it did, please let me know and I'll do something like it again in future. But I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I will let the rest of this video play out, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.
Jill, you did a fine job.